Welcome to the Business Book Challenge with the Coaching Network. My name is Maria Medina, and I am your business and networking coach. Today, we're going to be going through the Five Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Now, if you are one of those people that learns through storytelling, I really recommend this book. I've personally read it about 5 times, so I really enjoyed rereading it again. We learn all the techniques about how to make a team more functional by hearing the experiences that a newly appointed CEO, Catherine Peterson, is going through and all the different personalities that are in her team, including, I believe it was Mickey, the marketing director, that is unable to change and really struggles with collaboration. And then you also have the really competitive sales guy, JR. And you learn throughout all her team how you can really engage in active communication and all these 5 skills that really help your team get a little bit more functional, efficient, and communicative. The way Patrick teaches us about making our team more functional through learning about Catherine and her team is by teaching us what the 5 main dysfunctions are, so what the 5 main issues usually are, and how we're able to help those. So let's go through them one by one. The first dysfunction is absence of trust. And I often do communications workshops with teams where I really try to establish that trust because it is crucial to everything else that comes after it. If people don't feel comfortable in a team with discussing their failures, their accomplishments, or bringing up issues that they may have, there is no clear communication and people start defending themselves. They don't want to listen to the other person. There's a lack of trust in expressing what's going through. So you get people that get left behind or fall behind. They don't really get to say what they want to say because they don't feel like they trust the team enough to be able to share without judgment. That is so important. Trust comes from being able to walk into a room with one colleague or multiple colleagues and being able to share your experiences in the business and in personal life that may be affecting your business, and knowing that they're going to come from a place of understanding rather than judgment. And if that trust doesn't come in, the communication cannot get started. There is no clear path to communication because people don't trust that they're going to get the right treatment when they're expressing what they need to express. Whether it's, hey, this isn't working, I have this idea, or I saw that this had to get done, but it didn't get done. Why isn't this happening? And it's impairing my work. Anything that is happening within a team and that communication isn't able to be had is going to start building that mistrust, right? There is no trust there. So people start working on their own and there is no teamwork there. The second dysfunction is fear of conflict. This can stem from trust when people don't trust themselves enough to have that conversation because either they're going to be an agitator and they're going to argue back, or they feel like the other person is going to argue back. But it can also be a personality issue. There are people out there that really get that discomfort from confrontation. They don't want to have those difficult conversations. They would rather avoid them. And by not having those conversations and avoiding that essential conflict, which could be constructive, they're not able to really collaborate with their team because nobody knows where they stand and they don't know where the other people stand. The air isn't cleared. If something is going wrong and you're either blaming somebody, there's that resentment, there's that fear that's coming in and it's affecting the team dynamic. So if people are really avoiding conflict, whether it's personality thing or a communication or difficulty in communicating with people because of that trust, the dysfunction is very apparent in a team because people are avoiding. And again, this separates people. So there's no collaboration, there's no teamwork. People are being separated by this conflict because it either breeds additional distrust or it's breeding that resentment in other people because they're not feeling like they can express themselves because they're avoiding that conflict. They don't want to hold people accountable, which we'll go through again. They don't want to have those difficult conversations because it can be uncomfortable. I'm actually one of those. I really don't like that. I go outside my comfort zone to have those difficult conversations sometimes, but it does take quite a bit. And we'll talk about this with my guests. Coming from a leader, it's very, very important to know your team, know what their comfort levels are, and being able to communicate with them so that when there is that level of discomfort or when they have that communication that they want to share with you, you're giving them different avenues of communication. Does this person feel comfortable sharing it in front of a group? Does this person prefer to pull you aside and tell you one-on-one, whether you're the boss or a colleague? Would this person rather have it all in writing? And I'm talking to your legal professionals out there because I know that you prefer to have everything in writing, especially when it comes to conflict resolution, often in your cases, but also with your employees and your staff. So what way do you prefer to have this conflict resolution? I'm not saying avoid it. I'm saying find the way that works for you, that you can resolve it and move on together. Move on as a team with that collaboration again. There's that word, the importance of collaboration and teamwork. You need to be able to, as a leader and as a team member, understand what other people in your team are comfortable with. And that comes with what we've spoken about before, communication and getting to really know the people that you're working with, whether they're in your organization or outside of it. Vendors, clients, suppliers, who are all these people that you're interacting with, and what are their modes of communication so that you can engage with them at a level that they feel comfortable and they're more likely to share with you. The third dysfunction gets fed again by that lack of trust and that fear of conflict. And what it is a lack of commitment. People don't want to commit to certain results or to certain solutions and certain projects because they feel like they didn't get it in. They didn't get a chance to communicate during the process of decision making. Maybe they want to avoid conflict by not saying, I don't think that's a good idea. And then when the project gets passed on anyway, because they didn't say how they really felt, they feel like they're not really committed to it because they don't believe in it. But if they didn't get a say, whether it's because they want to avoid that conflict or whether because that trust isn't there for them to share openly. And the book goes through this when somebody's giving an idea. I believe it was the head of marketing and people didn't want to argue with her because she would argue back. So what is happening in your team that is making people not commit to the strategy? Are you having individual sessions after the team meeting? Are you having individual sessions in between the team meeting? So you have a team meeting, you're discussing solutions, and then you break off into little groups so that people actually get a say. And then you come back and you discuss it as a group before the final decision is made. Or are you forcing people to make the decision then and there in front of the team where they might not feel as comfortable in sharing those issues and sharing the doubts that they may have or the additional ideas that may contribute and make it better? So it's not always that lack of commitment where they don't believe in the idea, but it might be that lack of commitment where they're like, hey, there's a better way to do this, or there's something that we can do to enhance this idea, but they don't have that confidence. They don't feel that confident in sharing with the team because of their personality or because of the other personalities in the room. So what is causing that discomfort to commit to the outcome, to commit to the strategy? What conversations are you having with your team and with your key players and stakeholders that ensure that, hey, yes, I have a buy-in in this. I believe in what we're doing and we're going to make this happen together. The fourth dysfunction is avoidance of accountability. And again, the last three that we just spoke to are going to feed directly into this. If you don't have that buy-in, if you don't have that commitment that people are making to strategy or whatever it is that you're doing, how are they going to keep themselves and others accountable if they don't really believe in what they're doing? And if they don't want that conflict, how are they going to confront that person that's not doing what they're supposed to be doing? And if they have additional ideas as it's going through, but there's no trust in the team where they can share, this mistake happened, this is how we fixed it, I messed up, this is how I fix it, or I think that you messed up, as again with the conflict, if that trust isn't there, are you going to have clear communication to be able to say, hey, you said you were going to do this, but you didn't do it. What's going on? What happened? Why didn't you do it? It's not an accusatory, you didn't do it now, or you didn't do it, why? Let me help understand you why it's not happening. Do we need to adjust? Is it not the right thing for you to do? That trust needs to be there to have that open conversation so you can adjust, keep each other accountable. What is going on? Why is it not working? But also keep yourself accountable. And you want that buy-in so that yes, I believe in this, I'm going to do this. And these are the things that I need to keep track so that I know that I'm doing what I need to be doing when it needs to be done for the good of the team. So that accountability is very important, but it stems from the other three. You have to have clear communication and trust. You have to have that buy-in. You have to have that commitment to the goal or that commitment to the strategy, but you also have to be aware that there might be a little bit of conflict with keeping people accountable. Some people don't like to be told that they haven't done, especially when it comes to a boss. What happens if your boss says they're going to do something and they don't do it? How do you hold them accountable to that? Accountability is very important, but clear communication needs to be in place in order for you guys to keep yourselves accountable and your team accountable. On top of that, I'm a very data driven person. So you want to make sure that the accountability is being kept through metrics. How are you measuring accountability? What should be done and when should it be done? What is this pros map or for the strategy? How is the strategy going to be implemented and when? Who's making sure when things are getting done? Whose responsibility is that? Is that the team lead? Is it the boss? Is it yours to track your own? Clear communication is important when applying a strategy or working on a project together as a team so that you know when and how to keep each other accountable. The final dysfunction is inattention to results. And I found this a little bit difficult when I first started reading the book to understand because I thought it's just people being selfish. They're just caring about their own results. They don't care about the team or the team results overall. They're focused on their career advancement. They're focused on their own things. They're just being selfish. But other ways that this can come into play is actually personality. If you're a people pleaser and all you care about is people liking you, you're going to be agreeable. You are going to avoid that conflict. You're going to maybe get around certain conversations and not commit to things because you don't want people to dislike you. And that is where you start to lose that trust because people don't trust your decision making process. They know that you're ultimately looking out for yourself and you're just trying to be liked. You're saying what everybody wants to say. So if you're having separate conversations with different employees or different colleagues, and you're just telling them what they want to hear, a trust is gone. You're avoiding conflict because all you want to do is be liked and all you care about is your own position. You don't really care about what's happening in the team or what the team is trying to achieve. You're just trying to achieve your own goal, which is being liked in your company, which is exactly what Nick goes through. He doesn't want to make decisions in this book. He wants to be liked by everybody. So he's avoiding those difficult decisions. He's avoiding those confrontations and calling people out and keeping them accountable, which are the 4 dysfunctions that we were just talking about. So all in all, these 5 dysfunctions are great ways to look at how to work better with a team by avoiding them, working through them, and helping people work with them. So you're helping people communicate better. You're engaging in active listening by really getting to know your team and how they like to interact with each other and other people. And you're really looking at those 5 dysfunctions with the lack of trust, the lack of commitment, the avoidance of conflict, the avoidance of accountability, and finally, what we were just talking about, which is that inattention to results because you're more worried about yourself. In order to make your team function better, improve communications within your company, you have to pay attention to the 5 things that could go wrong with a team, which they go through very well in this book. I highly, highly recommend it. And I'm really glad that I got the next guest because I think she speaks very well to how people are going through these things when change happens. And it's a very difficult situation sometimes when any of these dysfunctions are happening within a team. And on top of that, you're going through certain change, which is what they did here. Catherine came in as a new appointed CEO. Now that we have gone through the 5 dysfunctions of a team, I wanted to bring in a special guest I met recently, actually through Facebook. I did a little notification on a group and I ask for speakers. And this is a great way for you guys to meet other people. So please welcome my guest. She is a fellow business coach and consultant, Jen Bilger. She really specializes in helping teams and companies through change, which is why I wanted her here today. Jen, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, and I love doing stuff like this, these podcasts and getting out there and talking. I call myself a corporate flunky. I did 20 plus years in corporate HR and decided I wanted to step away from corporate and start my own business. So I do help people with leadership coaching and coaching people through change. And I've even written a book about it. So I hope it's okay that I mention my book. It is called Change is Inevitable: 6 Key Actions to Lead Any Team Through Change. And some of the things, you'll hear some of those answers when we're talking about how to help with that, because really when you're working with teams, there's a lot of change. There's a lot of disruption, especially in the last 5 years. There's a lot of things going on. And my passion is helping people solve those problems. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much again for being here today. And let's dig right into it. And as we're going through the 5 dysfunctions, we were really talking about how trust and the importance of a team is. And I really like how she tells the story going through that team dynamic of change. And how would you recommend that somebody fosters trust during a significant change in a company or in a team, even when there's still that little bit of a dysfunction? How are they able to bring the team together through that trust?
So it's so important to understand your own style, how you interact with people, your own vulnerabilities, because the best way to create trust is through empathy. And empathy is created when you are allowing people to understand who you are and how you relate best to them. So not only understanding yourself, but also understanding who your team members are. And so how to practically put that into motion is by making sure that you are understanding who your team is, not only personally, but professionally. And I'm not saying it has to be a gossip fest or a gab fest or anything like that. I worked for a company that was out of Montreal. I didn't work in Montreal. I worked in the States. I was actually their HR for the States. And I used to get a lot of complaints because their work day is very regimented. They come to work, they put their heads down, they work a lot, but then they have like 2 hours at the end of the day where they go to a bar or go out and they have that conversation. Well, here in the States, we do that a little different. We want to have those, hey, how was your weekend conversations throughout the day. And I would oftentimes have to tell my coworkers that were from Montreal, so here we do stuff with our family and friends after work. We don't do this with work people after work is done. So if you want to create those relationships, you have to do that during the day. So during lunch, when you come in the morning, you have to take that 15 minutes and say, I had a great weekend. This is what I did. And creating those things. And it can be as simple as, hey, I remember that you were going to go visit this place or you were going to go do that. How was it? Having a 10-minute quick get to know somebody, you're going to learn a lot about the people, but you're also going to learn who they are, what their strengths are, what their limitations are, and allow that to just build that trust and build that relationship, build that bridge, build those things that you have in common. So when there is a big issue that does occur, you already have that established. You don't have to establish it before you solve the problem. It's already there. This is one of my favorite books because it points out that trust is so important, and it is. And it's one of those things that you can walk into a relationship with some sense of trust in the beginning, but once you do something to break that trust, it is so devastating to try to get that trust back. So keeping everything up to par, keeping everything in order, keeping that trust level where you may have that trust there, but it's just keeping that and not losing it at all. Doing everything you possibly can to ensure that you do what you say, you walk the walk when you talk the talk, kind of thing. And being that good, solid leader that they can go to when they have an issue and opening that door for those things. So
We've gone through that before in some of the other books that we've discussed about leadership and even about networking, where active listening is really important. And you mentioned it exactly as you said. You know, that person took that trip or their kid had the soccer game. Ask about it, get to know them, and listen to actually listen rather than to respond so that you can really understand where they're coming from. And I feel that that's a lot of the time, like you said, once you lose that trust, it's so much harder to gain it back. And that is where conflict arises, right? That's where conflict happens, misunderstandings. There's no open communication. People feel like they can't go to you to tell you a problem because that trust doesn't exist. And so they're not willing to receive that criticism or clear that conflict. They let it just fester. So, what other techniques besides open communication would you encourage people to be able to resolve conflict in an effective way?
Conflict is one of those things that is the hardest thing to overcome, especially as an HR person, I had to deal with it all the time. So this is kind of my bread and butter, actually. So asking first, this is one of the most paramount things, asking why, asking how and why something occurred so you can get to the root of the issue. And many times that one question resolves so many things. I actually have a really good story that goes around this, and it's not conflict in general, but it's about asking why and how it's so important. I came into a company and we had somebody who was constantly late, and they were constantly late to the point where it was 10 to 20 minutes late on when their start time was. And I worked in an industry that had federal contracts, and there was a lot of things that were there. We had to have things in order, and we had to have processes and procedures in place. And there was a lot of that in this industry. So we wrote them up, sat down with them and said, you can't continue to be late. Never asking them how, why, what's going on, nothing of that nature. I was brand new doing this with this organization. The first write-up, I was only there a month. So it was more of a, all right, the data shows this person's been late in the last month 15 times. We've got to sit down and tell them unacceptable. Here's the process. Here's what we need to do. So we get the first write-up out in place. Person consistently still does it. And we're to the point where we're going to fire this individual. So we've gone through the first write-up, the second write-up. Nobody ever asked the question why. In the last one, I looked at the person and I said, can you just tell me why you have not, what's going on? And the person sat down and said, my wife lost her job. We had to sell our second car. Our kids need to get to school in the morning. And I'm taking my kids to school. And I was hoping to get through to the summer so I can get some relief there. And my wife can get a job. And hopefully by the next school year, we only had this many more weeks. So I was hoping to do that. I was about to devastate this person's life even more after the person went through. The wife lost the job in a layoff. They had to sell the second car. They had after school activities and pickup so he could work his whole thing. All it took was adjusting the schedule by a half an hour for this individual. Here we were going to fire somebody, make their life so much worse. And the person never spoke up. They were just like, yes, I'm being late. I'm late. I understand. I'll try not to do it again. That was the whole of the conversation for the first two meetings there. So it's so important to ask that question first, because sometimes if we would have asked that question when we sat down with them the first time, we would have resolved the issue and we wouldn't have had the second write-up and almost firing the individual or making the mistake of firing. So when it comes to conflict in and of itself, asking that question why is so very important, and getting down to that root of that issue. You can do things like making sure that you set ground rules for things, seeking those things, giving permission for people to say what needs to be said. A lot of times I would sit and people would be sitting there and I'm like, you have something to say what you need to say. As soon as I would say that, they would say it. And it's just like a year of having this conflict. And all I needed to say was, say what you need to say. I'm giving you permission. Sometimes people need permission to say those things. It does have to do with the type of person they are, their personality type, their style. I tend to use the word style a lot. When you understand that somebody who has a passive style is going to not want to rock the boat, giving permission to somebody like that means a world of difference, because now they have somebody saying it's okay to say it. It's okay to open up. It's okay to say what's really bothering you in this situation.
Permission is very, very important in establishing, as we were talking about, that trust, that comfort for people to say, okay, I'm allowed to say what's going through, but then also understanding, hey, maybe this person doesn't want to say it in the group of 10 of us. Maybe this person wants to talk to me after. Maybe this person wants to send me an email, do it over a call, but just being that leader that says, hey, whatever you need to say, I understand you may not want to say it here, but it has to be said. Feel free in your own comfort level to reach out to me and tell me what's going on so we can have this open communication, which I guess what you were saying was also speaks to the fact of accountability. They were being held accountable, but they didn't feel like they could share why. So it's lucky that they had you, but it also says a lot about the company because they didn't feel that sense of comfort that they could say, hey, I'm going through this. Please bear with me. Can we do something? You had to ask, you had to give them that permission. And I wanted to ask one last question before we cut off, that I know that a lot of my listeners are those overachievers, A-type people, and they get really frustrated, especially when they're in a team, they're performing, they're doing amazing, and then everybody else is slacking. How do you suggest that these people deal with these team members to help them maybe bump up to their level? Should they ignore these people? How do these overachievers deal with these team dynamics when they feel undervalued by their team members because they're not doing as much?
So this one's a difficult thing because everybody has a different strength and everybody has a different limitation. And within a team, you're going to have people who are doing more and people who seem to be doing less, but they're not. They're filling a different role is what's happening. So having some communication around what makes people happiest in those situations, I have found assigning people to the right types of tasks allows them to relax and not worry about the work they're putting into something. And that seems so simplistic and so common sense. But a lot of times, if you are an analyst, your job is to analyze, and the person next to you is an analyst and their job is to analyze, and you have a similar position, you feel like you should be doing the same amount of work. And that's not always the case because what you do is specialized here and what they do is specialized here. So you both are putting in the same amount of work, but you just can't see it in the results sometimes. So it's more about doing things like focusing on the whole of things, focusing on those results a little bit, but not the specific results. And I know that seems counterproductive because you're telling me that's what they're doing. They're focusing in this area. But what you're going to do is make sure that they're happy with what they're doing and happy with the results they're doing, giving them praise for what they're doing, making sure that they understand that they're valued, that their input is valued. So what this looks like and I apologize because when I go into this, when I'm ushering people through change, it's assigning people the right types of tasks and making sure that through that decision-making process or through that project or task or anything that's there, it's understanding what people's needs are. So somebody who's a problem solver needs to have they're early adopters. They are looking at what the future may hold. And these are people who want to make those choices, want to have a little bit more control. You put them in charge of something that's part of it. You give them something that makes them very happy and fills that need because they're less likely to be looking at what other people aren't doing when that occurs. So influencers are people who want to get people on board with things. So you use them to help you influence other people to move through that change, to make that choice or to adopt something or do something of that nature.
So what you were saying originally, which was get to know your team, get to know their
Yes.
strengths, get to know where they fit in, and figure out how they can make your team work at its best, at its full potential. And I hate to cut it short, but it's always I love this book. This is one of my favorite books. I think I've read it about 5 times, so I really loved rereading it. But I want to give my listeners and viewers a chance to connect with you. So if they're interested in talking more about this book or just talking about change in general, how do they reach back out to you?
So my website is Coach Jen Bilger, and it's JenBilger.com. You can also use the QR code that's been sitting up there the whole entire time. It gets you to my link tree that gets you everything, including where I am, what I'm doing, how to get a hold of me, all of that, my Calendly link, all of that kind of wonderful
And
stuff.
it's got your book on there as well. So guys,
My
please
book
make
is there.
sure that you
Yes.
check out Jen's book on there, check out her link tree, and connect with her if you're interested in talking more about change and how to help your team go through change, but also different leadership styles, different employee types, and how to get to know them so that they can make your team and your business run more efficiently.